So I'll begin. My name is Ben Schonberger. I am a board member here at Housing Land Advocates, and in my day job, I'm a land use planner for Winterbrook Planning. I guess our logo's not on the screen anymore, but we're a sponsor, and I appreciate that from my firm. And also just to say that we're a team of land use planners and environmental experts. We work with both the public and private sectors all over the region on all kinds of projects, including housing. So thanks to Jesse and Grace and Larissa and everybody who's here from my company. Appreciate that. One other housekeeping item. I am a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. We, like the lawyers, are going to get continuing ed credit for this. We do have to ask, and that means it takes a minute to, thank you, Maddie, write up the summaries of all the things that we're doing, submit it to 2 different levels of the American Planning Association, get it approved, get it on their website. But if you're AICP and you're looking for that, it won't be ready tomorrow, but I have everybody's email. I'll send out an email, and then you can go just get the credits yourself from the National APA website. So just please be patient with us. It'll get there eventually. Okay. That being said, let's move on to the session. So this session I'm really excited about. It is, the goal is to expand our thinking a bit about housing production. The panelists that we put together are a real diverse group that has various different kinds of experiences working on housing in rural areas of the state. I was partly tempted to title this session "Get Out of Town," but then I didn't think that was all that welcoming. So catchy, but not welcoming. So we went with something a little more pedestrian: rural housing production. So for many of us in the room, our thinking and advocacy around housing is very often focused on the metro region, and that's natural because many of us, if not most of us, live here or work here. But Oregon is a really big state, and the local context and the challenges faced with housing are very different in, for example, John Day or Brookings or Vernonia, compared to metro cities like Portland or Beaverton or Tualatin. So we wanted, as part of this conference, to recognize that and make sure that we're not just fixated on the problems that we have here in Portland. So when you think about it, something that unites us as Oregonians is that it's really hard to build housing. And that's true kind of wherever you are in the state. So rural areas and small towns everywhere are struggling to provide that housing for all the people that want to live in those wonderful places. And the kind of housing that the people in those communities demand and are seeking might be different for lots of different reasons, for limitations of topography and resources and labor and workforce. But there have been success stories, and we hope to touch on a few of those today. We've brought together some very interesting and accomplished people to have them relate their tales of housing production in rural communities. And some of those communities that they'll be touching on specifically are Woodburn, Coos Bay, North Bend, and Donald. Well, if you said where, that's my point. I've lived in Oregon 30 years now, and I had to look up Donald because I wasn't exactly sure where it is. So I looked at their stories ahead of time, and it's clear that each of these panelists have something to teach us about the situations with these communities that are outside the immediate Portland region and different models of how to get these new housing units built. So with that, I'd like to give brief introductions of who I brought together today. First up is Maria Elena Guerra. Maria is the Executive Director of Farmworker Housing Development Corporation and also of Evolve Workforce and Multifamily Housing Services. Under her leadership, these organizations collaborate with communities of color to ensure that the opportunities to pursue prosperity and growth are stable and abundant. She has nearly 2 decades of experience in asset management, housing development, and community programming. She works alongside Oregon's rural Latinx communities and the affordable housing industry. Prior to her current position, she had jobs for Reach CDC and Hacienda CDC as an asset manager and property manager. She's originally from Guayaquil, Ecuador, and holds a bachelor's degree from Espirito Santo University, which is there. And she has a master's degree in public administration from the land on which we stand at Portland State University. And she lives in Portland, and we're delighted to have her with us. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Let me introduce everybody, and then I'll call you up after that. Right. So, Steve Sanden is going to go after Maria. He is the executive director of Bay Area First Step. The bay that we're talking about is Coos Bay. They're located in Coos Bay, Oregon. Just to do the bona fides, Coos Bay is population 16,000. So definitely a small town in the Oregon context. Bay Area First Step is a peer-run organization specializing in substance abuse treatment, drug and alcohol-free housing, and recovery support services. Steve's dedicated to helping individuals overcome addiction and find their path to recovery, and he's devoted his career to this cause. He participates in boards, councils, and committees, including as a member of the Mental Health and Addictions Association of Oregon, the Oregon Alcohol and Drug Policy Commission, Addictions and Mental Health Planning and Advisory Council, and Coos Health and Wellness Mental Health Advisory Committee. I'm really grateful that you came all this way to join us. Finally, our third panelist is Connie Lindsay. Connie is the Sales and Marketing Manager at GK Machine in Donald, Oregon. And I swore I was going to say GK Machine because it's not GK Machines, even though they make machines. It's GK Machine. Just for factual purposes, Donald is between Wilsonville and Woodburn. I had to look it up. GK Machine is a large manufacturing company that engineers, designs, and builds agricultural and industrial equipment. This company employs about 200 people: welders, assemblers, laser techs, engineers, machinists, and other staff. As you can imagine, a company like that in a town of that size has demand for housing. And she's going to talk a little bit about that. She has an agricultural background, and before her job at GK Machine, she was the manager of the Oregon State Fair for a number of years. She has a degree from Oregon State University. We're really excited to have all the panelists here, so let's get right into it. We'll save all our questions as before at the end, so start thinking about what you want to ask folks as they present. And to kick it off, I'm really delighted to introduce Maria Elena Guerra.
We will see. So the first thing that I asked today was to put on a stool. There is no way that I will go behind this podium, but you know, we didn't get the stool. We have a very good technology in here. Oh, clicker for them. Perfect. Disclaimers, important. I'm not a lawyer. I understand land and land acquisition, not as much as land regulations. I am also not a developer. Developers are really technical people, very important people in the work that I do. But if I can call myself a developer, many of you will be insulted. So let's keep that in mind. I do have, I believe, a skill, and this is that I can see the human side of the work that I do and that my organization does. I can find a way that numbers tell a story. But I'm not going to talk about numbers today because you're not the audience for numbers. I know that too. Thank you. One more thing. Happy Women's Day to us and all of those that identify as female today. With that introduction, I would like to talk a little bit about Farmworker Housing Development Corporation. And when you see the farm worker, you know that I'm building a housing for farm workers. But actually, we do more than that. We have senior properties, we have workforce properties. So please do not just put us in a box of farm worker housing. We do, the majority of our units are dedicated to farm workers. And we have been in business for more than 30 years, and especially in the Willamette Valley. Since 1990, we have been transforming the life of people in rural areas of Oregon. Again, the Willamette Valley, those places where nobody wanted to go. When the governor at that point needed to say to a city, or you allow them to build affordable housing, or I will keep all the money to your city on my pocket until you help this organization. Those are the things that sometimes we have to use as a strategy. We, at this point today, we have 12 properties in 7 different cities and 3 different counties. Thank you. Thank you. But we do more than housing. If you think that talking about land development and housing development, it stops in there, no. We need to talk, when we talk about affordable housing, we must talk about supporter services. What are the programs that are gonna make these individuals successful in their housing first? What are the support that we are gonna be providing, the programs for the kids that can be, instead of in front of a computer or playing with their cell phone, they can be out running like kids. All those services are some of the ones that we provide. After school programs, ESL classes for newcomers to this country, and many other. And keep in mind, we don't do this alone. It will be impossible for a staff of 11 people to do the amount of work that we do. We engage in partnership. We talk to people in the industry, and we say, if we're gonna go to that city, we are gonna engage with those nonprofits in there to provide our services. If I want something to take you from this conference today, at least from me, look at that picture. It's a picture that makes me get up every morning, because it's a picture that represents the before and after. How our families are treated, how the access of affordable housing can impact entire families and individuals. You can see in here, people living in under housing conditions. And on the other side, you can see an entire family, a mother holding her kids, smiling. Kids learning about their culture, learning about music, arts. A little bit of demographics in our portfolio. More than 55% of our portfolio, believe it or not, are youth from ages 0 to 18. More than 85% of our community graduate from high school with a high school diploma. The average age in our community is 24, extremely young. Average income for a family of 5, $37,000. How can you survive? Not talking about driving, but surviving with $35,000, 37, I'm sorry, for a family of 5. 85% of our families are BIPOC, people of color. But how do we do this? How do we make this possible? We serve more than 2,500 individuals, even though we only have 470 units. That's not many in 30 years of work, believe me. But how we do this work is very important. So the properties that we own and we manage, by the way, are dedicated to farm workers. But only 55% of their income needs to come for farm labor. Because I hope we all know that in reality, the farm labor business is not a year-round business. So we need to keep that in mind. We also have, like I say, property dedicated to seniors, low-income families, working families. And we have find a recipe now to do a mixed kind of housing. 50% of the housing is still for farm workers, and 50% of the same property house people, low-income families, in any trade. We were talking about supportive housing, supportive services. Nothing that we do, believe me, nothing. A unit is nothing without the families in there and without the supportive services. And when I talk to supportive services, it can be from, sure, rental assistance, but also medical access, medical vans that goes to our properties and take care of our families and children. Here, I just have several pictures of the events that we do every year in our properties. We celebrate culture, we celebrate both, the Latinx culture and this country's culture. We try to make sure that our residents understands where are they living and what are the good parts of living in here, but also what are the responsibilities. You can see in here, our kids always playing, always up to something. And that's, believe me, I come from 15 years on property management. I need that and not the kids playing with my sprinkler system. So we have two functions, really, in what we do. And I'm gonna jump a little bit in evolved workforce and multifamily service. By the way, you are getting two for the price of one, because I manage two property nonprofit organizations. So evolved workforce and family services was created by FACC back in 2016, because we saw how our residents were treated by the private industry. Not saying, by the way, that the private industry is bad. No, I'm saying merely, I'm trying to say they need to invest more in cultural education. That's it. They can do it, but they need to educate their staff. So from Evolve, property management and workforce development, I am the product or that investment. And that investment is that FACC put me into a career that allowed me to buy my own house, to be at the position that I am. So besides doing all the work that they were doing in housing people, they also investing in education. And just one example, there are many that we have been able to provide help with. Our investment in our average investment in each staff every year is $2,000 minimum in training. And that obviously includes equity and inclusion, because yes, we are people of color. And we are also human beings. We sometimes commit the same mistakes that other has imposed on us. So we have to learn, we have to understand. Here it is, two ladies also that went through the process of workforce training, one in accounting, the other one as a site manager. Both of them real good stories. Both of them already out of our organization and in better positions, and positions that can pay more than a nonprofit can pay. And that is a success story, because in every place that we can put people that are culturally savvy and that understand the challenges of all human beings first, but also people of colors and other, we are ahead of the game. So this is our training component. These are our numbers. I say I was gonna not talk about numbers with you guys, but it's impossible not to mention some. So the classes that we provide are bilingual, English and Spanish. We do a mix of in-person training and also online. 80% are BIPOC participants, 80% graduated from our programs are women. Yes. And 85% of the people that enter in our program have a high school degree. That's it. You don't need anything else. Sometimes that's much better. Yeah. Growth. What are we doing now? Today is one of the one-on-one coaching. So these people that we have trained still needs a push. It still needs to know, okay, where are going with this? Where are my options? So we are doing that now. And we engage with Schonberger Community College in the area of Woodward and any other organization that can engage with us in this. Training. I talk about the training platforms in person, online. We have several cohorts that we have run for the last 2 years with incredible participation from females. As you can see, the blue one are females, the orange are males. So property management is a business and where the female representation is great. And I'm gonna tell you why. Because in our case, we offer you a unit in the same property that you manage. That's is a huge gain for, especially for single moms. They have their kids in there, they work next door, and their kids can go to the after school program. I have to say, that's an excellent recipe for success. The ones that complete, obviously, most of the training, also females. But let's go back to housing and let's go back to what we offer, because what we offer is, again, is not a unit, it's a community. And part of a community is always art and cultures. In each of our programs and projects, we have murals that represent, first, the struggle of the farm worker community, the hard work for putting food on our tables. And these murals are everywhere. In Colonia Paz, which is our last project in Lebanon, we represented we are in the pandemic, so we have to honor those out there working while we were safely working from home. And that, by the way, also include farm workers. So these are the murals that we have. Some of them, by the way, were done by kids. Along with the artists, the kids also help. Don't ask me how, because I cannot really manage a bunch of kids. But obviously, you know, our artist was able to do that. But what is important about just not the murals, that, by the way, each mural in our properties tells the story of the name of the property. In the case of Colonia Paz in Lebanon, like I say, well, Paz was built during a very different and challenging time when people of color were terrified of what's going on out there. And we wanted to honor that. And that's why we say we are coming into a rural area in peace. That's what Colonia Paz means, by the way, peace. Colonia Unidad, another property. You can see the mural in there. Why Colonia Unidad? Again, the same situation. A lot of organizations got together. We don't do it alone. Cities are extremely important for us. City administration, funders, grant makers, all of them, colleges. But the important part about our murals is the access also to art to our kids, because the majority of our kids don't go, you know, they cannot go to a ballet or any kind, and they don't have much of the time exposure to art. And this is the way and how we want to tell them, you can also be this if you want to. Sorry, not good pictures. And these are our artists, and especially in our new property in Lebanon. So that is the presentation for introducing you to organizations. I want to talk a little bit, if I have time, about the challenges that we face in rural areas. So different from metro, somebody talked about metro and the fact that, you know, metro areas get all the attention, mostly. And when I say all the attention, it gets money, it gets resources. And don't get me wrong, I live in Portland. I want to see a solution in homeless. I want to see a solution in housing. But I serve a population that is in rural areas. I see my kids coming from college and not having a house or a unit to live, affordable to live, and get back to their own communities. And we need to resolve that. But when we go into rural areas, especially if you look like me and if you talk like me, we get resistance. We are coming and get comments like, we are gonna be waiting for you with our guns ready. That's how we are welcome. Sometimes I don't want to say that this happens in every community, but in these times of, I'm sorry, but we live in a very difficult time with hate. It's maximum potential. And because of that, during the construction of our last property, we have to hire for the first time in 30 years, a land use attorney. Thank you, Jennifer Regard, for your help. I don't think we could have built 130 units in rural America without her help. And I have to say, something that I remember for Jennifer, the first time that I talked to her and she was preparing me to go in front of the city council, she said, do not talk. I am the person that talks all the time in behalf of my organization. How dare you tell me that? And she just repeated, do not talk. Say, okay. And you know, lawyers, you have to respect them. They know what to do mostly. So I did not, and we won that battle. We won we won 130 individuals, families that today their kids play in a place that at some point didn't welcome them. So if you talk about challenges, those are the challenges that we face. Still at this time, it's sad, it's terrifying sometimes. When a person talks to me about equity, but still asks me if I'm gonna house white folks, it hurts me. Because first, I always say, where is fair housing around here? You know, I get like, hopefully they're not filming all that. The other problem that we have in rural areas is access to financial support. Most of the time, big cities, and again, metro area gets all the money. They get a special money, they get dedicated money. We don't get that. We have to fight. Small cities don't have the money to build entire roads that sometimes we pitch in and build. And today, I'm trying to build another 130 units, and the road cost me 2.5 million. It's extremely impactful, and the cost of per unit. And that doesn't make a good application with Oregon House and Community Service. They see the number and say, ooh, no, these guys can put double units with the same amount of money. And cities are responding to that. I want to thank cities. If any rural city of Oregon are here, they are responding. The mayors are coming out and saying, let's work this together. Let's apply for grants together. Let's do this. Let's try to support your work. So we are trying to collaborate more. But believe me, the attention and the investment is needed in rural areas. We need to provide those folks with access to affordable housing. Capacity. Let's talk a little bit about capacity in rural areas in regards to small organizations like mine. The regulations in housing, for those who in the room who knows really and do housing like I do, know are killing us. It's too much, too many changes. We don't have the staff capacity to respond to those changes. And for that, we get out of compliance. Sometimes we don't give, we're not even given the time to rectify. And that can impact, actually impacts our future applications. Finally, those are some of the challenges that we have in rural areas. More investment is needed, definitely. I wanna recognize the work that the governor today is doing in regard to housing. It's not perfect. It's never gonna be perfect, but it's the first governor, at least since I've been practicing housing development, community development, should say, that put housing first. And we wanna support that. We wanna move along. We wanna do it in a humane way. We want to make sure that we hear all in the room. But let's be honest, land is in extremely scarcity today. Most of the time, the land for affordable housing are in industrial areas. And if it's for people of color, is it in the last place of industrial areas? So thank you again for your time. I will welcome questions at the end. Thanks.
So next up is Steve Sanden. You got the clicker? Great, thanks.
Thank you. Today I'd like to just talk about three things, basically, a little about myself and where I've come from, my organization, and specifically recovery housing. So as I said, my name is Steve Sanden, and I was born in 1960 in Inglewood area near part of LA. And when I grew up in what I thought was a pretty normal, stable household, and I think for the most part, it was. There was one traumatic thing that I think kind of tore our family apart, and that was that I had a little sister that had a rare form of cancer, and she died when I was 8. And I think that kind of tore my family up a little bit. My parents and I moved to Alaska when I was in the 5th grade, and there was a dramatic difference, of course, in culture and environment. So my parents ended up divorced when I was 15, but other than that, I really didn't think too much about life being different than anybody else's, and I'm not sure it really was. Everybody has some traumatic things happen. I started experimenting with drugs and alcohol at 13, and I would say by 19, I was addicted to both. I continued that lifestyle until 22 years ago this month. I was in the Phoenix Inn, which was a motel that burnt down in Phoenix, Oregon. I was there, and I was basically facing all the consequences of 22 years of 23 years of addiction. And in that, I mean, similar to other folks that have been addicted, I had been bankrupt more than once. I had lost a couple. I'd had 2 homes foreclosed on. I hadn't seen my kids in years. I had relationships. I had legal problems. I owed taxes. My life was a mess, and I was literally hopeless at that time. I ended up not really having any idea what to do. I ended up ended up praying. And the next thing I knew, I was contacting the Phoenix Police Department and just telling them I was ready to face the pain. And they helped me do that. And basically I got taken to jail and had to take care of some misdemeanor warrants in several states, and ended up on parole, or I guess it was probation, but they asked me to find a 90-day treatment program, which I'd already been to several residential programs in my life. At that time, those weren't available very easily. They weren't found very easily, especially for that length of time. So I ended up finding a little place on the coast called Bay Area First Step. And they explained to me that they weren't treatment, but they did provide a safe environment for folks that attended treatment locally. So I talked to the corrections people and they agreed to let me go to that. So next thing I knew, I was at a little place called Bay Area First Step. And Bay Area First Step has changed over the years. When I first came there, it was just providing recovery housing. It was developed or organized in 1995, and their sole purpose was to provide supportive recovery housing. Since that time, we've offered peer support, which I guess we did unofficially all along, but we now actually do SUD outpatient treatment, which, along with we can do training and certified peers. We also have internships available in our treatment program. And we got to the point where the state of Oregon has asked us to assist other organizations that are peer run establish their programs. So I wanted to show you some of the housing that we have. This particular property is the one that I came to. The buildings on the left were not there at the time. The building on the right was, and there's actually two of the buildings on the right. You can only see one of them. Those are two buildings, each with 4 two-bedroom apartments in it. There was only one that was livable at the time, and we occupied that. There was men in one apartment, 6 men in one apartment, 6 women in another. There was a common one downstairs where everybody ate, watched TV, that type of thing. And a resident manager lived in the bedroom down there. And then the other unit, the remaining 4th one, was used for offices for the 2 employees that we had at that time. So they had these in the works to do these major renovations there. You can see they built a building in the back, and that was 8 SRO units. And then off to the left there is the clubhouse and meeting room, where also some admin space there. The next place we went was we leased a property from the Department of Corrections. They used to use it as a work center for a work release program for some of their inmates. It needed a lot of work, and we renovated it totally and ended up adding a bunch of bathrooms to it, that type of thing. And it now has 8 bedrooms, or 8 large rooms for sleeping. It has 3 offices, 2 kind of visiting type rooms, and a large kitchen and dining area. This is a 42-unit motel that we renovated. We're using it also has a restaurant there. One of the units is used as a stabilization unit for people, like, for example, maybe they're trying to get into detox, which we don't have available in our county, or residential treatment. They might stay there if they come to us on a weekend or something, and then we'll try to get them to where they need to be, possibly having to drive them out of county and that type of thing. But often it means waiting until Monday or whenever other organizations are open. So we were able to convert the restaurant into a recovery center. And they do a lot of life skills trainings, workshops, that type of thing. They do have some mutual support groups like AA, NA, that type, meeting there occasionally. And we also do a lot of our training there. So this is a emergency shelter that has been in our community for almost 50 years. A while back, the board of directors asked our organization to take it over. There had been some financial difficulties and they were struggling just to try to keep it going. So we weren't really in the emergency housing business, but we decided to take it on. Our community really needed to keep it going. There was almost zero emergency housing in our community. Since that time, we did make some tough changes. We stopped feeding the public and just fed the people that stayed there. We quit offering showers to the whole community. There were some cutbacks we had to do staffing wise and stuff to make it work. Since that time, our community has, our mission has, actually, it's interesting, our mission was in our community, but they housed very few people at a time. The previous people running it just had were very strict about who they would take in, and oftentimes it would be just a couple of folks there. Two of our residents that became peer support specialists and went to work for us went on to actually manage the mission, and they now keep it at full capacity at 60 beds. So we have less of a need for emergency shelter. There's also a couple of pallet house projects going on in our area. So we've decided now that we're going to go ahead and convert this into accredited recovery type housing. This is a new project that we hope to open next week. We had a grand opening last week for it. We're still waiting on final inspection. I believe that there's a piece of concrete that has to dry or something, but we're very close to having that one open. It's all furnished. It's just gorgeous. It's very large. We added 4 bedrooms to it, added some bathrooms. It now has 8 bedrooms and 5 baths, as well as a resident manager room. And this project is a future project. We have secured the funding and have the partnership established with the Coquel Indian tribe. It comes through their Coquel Wellness Program, and we're hoping to develop culturally specific recovery housing here with their help, and also the help of some other culturally specific programs around the state that we'll be consulting with, or they'll be consulting with us. So some of the challenges with recovery housing, this is a planning commission meeting where we were trying to get a conditional use permit for the motel that I showed you. The public was basically in outrage. NIMBY is one of our biggest problems, not in my backyard. But it also goes further with the city officials also. They tend to, a lot of them are business people, and they often have the same type attitudes as people in the community. And I think that's due mostly to just not understanding recovery, not understanding what recovery housing does. We got denied our conditional use permit, and we hired a land use attorney. And thank you very much. We appreciate you. She helped us out a lot. She helped us successfully get that conditional use permit. And let me show you what they were worried about. So this was the property that they were afraid we were going to somehow destroy and make the neighborhood worse. it was known for, it had been there forever. It was known for drug use and, you know, basically either renting charging out too much rent for people that were vulnerable, or just charging, you know, by the day or whatever. But typically it was, you know, it had a lot of pest problems and those types of things, and it was just not maintained at all. The restaurant had been closed for years. But we were able to get in there and the way that the community acted, it was just ridiculous. Some of the things they were worried about, they wanted to know, what about the windows? And we said, well, you know, I said, what do you mean the windows? And they're like, well, they'll be crawling out the windows and stuff. And I said, well, we're going to let them use the doors. You know, it's like, so they were really upset. But now it looks more like this, and we did a lot of work to it, and we're still doing a lot of work to it. I just saw on Facebook the other day one of our you know, what's happening Coos County or whatever, those type of groups. Somebody said, well, that place looks so much better. What's going on there? You know, nobody even knows what we do hardly, but they were really impressed with the way it looked. So I think, again, it's just a matter of stigma and people not understanding that recovery happens, and that is our logo. Recovery happens, and we know that it happens because we see it every day. As a matter of fact, the staff that we have now, 32 folks, 30 of them receive direct services from us, from our organization. So we kind of bring folks up through it, and there's a career path there, all the way to becoming counselors. Another challenge that we had was with the Department of Corrections building that I showed you, the old work center. That particular building is in downtown North Bend, and we got a lot of pushback when we first wanted to lease that from the Department of Corrections. It wasn't quite as bad as the motel was, as far as businesses and residents and things, but it was a little bit of it, and we had to do a lot of work to convince folks to let us be there. Again, another similar situation. There was already a conditional use permit, but somehow they had to decide that we could be there. To be good neighbors, later, after we did were able to occupy it and start renovating it, we decided to use this unused area. You can barely see it, but it's a fenced off area there where the prison had it for almost like an exercise place where people could walk around in circles out there or whatever. So this picture is taken from a public parking lot, and parking was really something that the city needed, downtown businesses needed. So we went ahead and worked with the Department of Corrections to portion that off so that they could lease part of it for parking. And so this is what it looks like now. They leased that portion for parking, and of course our building has been renovated, and all was well for a few years there. We got a new administration, and I don't know if they approached DOC or if DOC approached them, but they decided that they needed the property and they needed to expand it for parking because there was a couple of new pubs going into town, and even though they were addressing serious homeless challenges and stuff, they didn't recognize the value of us being there. And I don't think they had any idea how many folks we housed. So they tried to buy the entire property. And again, Jennifer helped us and through the surplus process, purchasing surplus property from the state. And unfortunately, they weren't very cooperative. They were pretty silent through the whole process. I suggested working together on it, things, but they just told me they were going to aggressively pursue it, and they did. So we ended up having to, we won. We had a winning bid on it, but we ended up having to pay full market price for it. And I think we could have worked together and probably got it for much less than they would have have what they wanted. Well, they wouldn't have had the whole property, but they would have been in good shape. So as it is now, I guess we're landlords and they lease a parking lot from us. So we'll have to work that out. I want to talk about recovery housing, accredited recovery housing, because I think it's part of the solution for the way people think about recovery housing and the NIMBY and city planning commissions and stuff. I think that accredited housing is something that might be easier to buy into for folks. There are a lot of recovery housing projects that are for profit and people just go in and do it all wrong, you know, but there's the organization called NAR, the National Alliance of Recovery Residents, and it's used in 36 states, including Oregon. MACBO is a certification board for that in Oregon. They're the ones that certify counselors, drug and alcohol counselors, and QMHAs and certified recovery mentor peers for substance use disorder. They've adopted the NAR accreditation, and a lot of our properties that I just showed you are NAR accredited, and more will be. So there's 14 states left that don't have any standards or little standards when it comes to recovery housing. So the federal government supports recovery housing. SAMHSA just came out with a recovery with the best practices for recovery housing, and they're recommending that. Excuse me 1 second. Sorry. So this is really best practices for recovery housing, and it's for states that they're recommending it for. They're recommending NAR recovery housing. The Biden White House also has come out with the National Drug Control Policy, has put out a model legislation, basically a cut and paste model of legislation that states can use to require recovery housing for all places that receive federal funding. And then the National Council on Behavioral Health and the state policy authored a state policy guide, and they advise states to use NAR recovery housing accreditation. So I'd put out a brief, and they recommend that states use both a housing first approach and a recovery housing approach, and they call that housing choice. I love it this morning when I heard that, heard Margaret, I believe, say that housing is healthcare, and that's actually becoming more and more true. I think it's always been true, but it's becoming true in the sense that I foresee Medicaid paying for it at some point. You know, it's awful hard to get somebody to participate in treatment or even peer services or whatever if they're homeless. They just can't do it. So we're looking forward to, I'm looking forward to that. I think it is the future. I do think it will require that recovery homes be accredited. And there are several, a big group of us in Oregon that have become NAR accredited. Senate Bill 1530 just passed. That's on the governor's desk. It has 18 million for recovery housing. And that's all NAR or Oxford accredited, but I believe it's all NAR for that particular bill. So just to conclude, I just think that I know that recovery housing is very affordable. The average price of cost is $800 a month. average cost of an SRO to build one is 300 to 600,000 a unit, is what the facts that I have here. It is low barrier. Some of the myths say that, you know, well, they'll kick you out, they'll do all these. I don't know any of the homes that are actually evicting people for a lapse or something like that. Typically what happens is they intensify services and make sure that, you know, a person is successful and can stay in housing. So recovery housing can help address homelessness. I think communities need to recognize that. And yeah, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. That was great. Thanks, Steve. That was great. So next, Connie Lindsay from GK Machined.
Great, thank you. Hello, I am representing GK Machine, and GK Machine has been in Donald, Oregon since 1976. Two brothers who graduated from Woodburn High School decided when they were 18 and 20 years old to open a repair shop in downtown Donald. Donald had 200 people living in the community at the time. And the two gentlemen, Gary and Keith, are the G and the K of GK Machine. So let's fast forward about 50 years or 48 years, and GK Machine has become a large manufacturing facility in Donald. We now have over 200 employees, engineers, machinists, fabricators, laser operators, and the like. We are now adding another 140,000 square feet to our facility to produce more agricultural equipment. And we are growing, and we are going to be hiring at least 30 to 50 more employees this year and another 30 to 50 more employees next year. In the town of Donald, there is very little to no housing which is available. So this is the town of Donald. And what we did is we started talking about how are we going to recruit and expand the facility and recruit the employees to Donald when there's very little to no housing. At the time we started this back in 2018, I think there was 2 or 3 employees that actually lived in the town of Donald. Donald is a town of less than 1,000 people. And it explains why. And there hasn't been a new house built in the city in over 20 years. So what we decided to do, oops, go back, is we decided to figure out how we were going to add housing to Donald. And so this was a very interesting problem that we had never faced before as an employer. In order for us to grow, the town needed to grow. And so we entered into a public-private partnership with the city of Donald to investigate how we could expand housing in Donald. And what we came up with is the owner of GK Machine, the owners, own several hundred acres of ag land around Donald. And what we did is we took 86 acres of that ag land and we incorporated it into the town of Donald. And so our project total is 61 acres, 10 acres of open space, and 2 acres of commercial property. So our vision for this, due to the agricultural background of GK Machine, is to create a beautiful neighborhood. Instead of building it around a beautiful golf course, we are going to build a beautiful neighborhood around a working farm and garden. So what does that look like? So we developed a concept, and the main garden is the hourglass through the main neighborhood. Your commercial space is at the top, multi-housing here at the top left, and the rest of these represent different sizes of housing. So we wanted to provide housing, small cottage homes, 1-car garage, 2-bedroom, 1-bath. We also wanted to provide family homes, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, larger family homes, 4 bedrooms. And then we also wanted to have a section for our 55 and older. So this is the section down below. And inside this agri-hood, we've decided to create pocket parks. Because of the densities of the PUD and Donald, the lot sizes are fairly small. So in order to help that feeling of the neighborhood is we've developed little pocket parks throughout the neighborhood to create more green, open, shared space for the community. And so we're foreseeing a farmer's market in the retail space, rentable raised beds for people who want to learn how to raise their own vegetables. We're going to develop a CSA program for the people who live in Donald, not just the neighborhood, but the entire city of Donald, where they can sign up for a box of food every couple of weeks during season. We'd like to see a farm to table style restaurant, open meeting space. We'd like to offer growing classes, canning classes, and all the things that go around food. So what we've seen so far is I had a meeting with the employees. Out of 200 employees, 35 employees showed up for the after work meeting with their spouses to learn about how to become homeowners. What GK has done to incentivize employees to buy housing is we developed an educational program for them. If they want to go to class and learn how to become mortgage ready, their credit score, their debt to income ratio, those kinds of things, and they go through this class and they become mortgage ready, GK Machine has a pot of money that we've set aside for employees who want to be homeowners, and we will help them with their down payment up to a certain level, depending on their tenure and their position at GK Machine. Because we know long-term, if people move to the community, that they will hopefully become long-term employees of GK Machine. There's no connection between their employment and the housing. I wanted to make that perfectly clear. These houses and these apartments are available for anyone and everyone. So far, I'm happy to report out of the 350 homes we plan on building, we have built 40 homes so far. Most of them are occupied. We are continuing to build more homes. Out of the 200 employees, I now have 24 employees living in Donald, and they walk to work every day. And what I see, and I've heard this throughout this conference, is the sense of community. I now see these employees, their spouses are becoming friends. Their kids are becoming friends. A couple weeks ago, one of them was going to put up a new fence. I think there was a dozen employees out there helping one another build a fence for a neighbor. And that is what I think is so exciting about this project, is really creating a sense of community. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. That leaves us with some time for questions. Yeah, we have 10 minutes for that. So Angel is my Oprah, I guess. So raise your hand and I'll also see if there's anything coming in from our online attendees. For any of our panelists, I'll let the crowd go first. And I have some questions in reserve if we want to do that. There's one there.
Okay. Thank you all so much for speaking about your experience to rural Oregon. It's just heartwarming to hear, and you all definitely traveled a bit. I know you're in Portland, but y'all still traveled, so thank you. One specific question I have, and if you don't have experience on this, this is certainly not a gotcha moment. I'm just trying to be transparent with my experience, is that I'm noticing now From a year ago, when I was speaking at the last conference, trans and queer and gender nonconforming housing security is being really threatened simply because there are now more than 20 states that are making people like me illegal, you know? And I guess it's just, there's times where I wanted to live in rural communities because at the end of the day, I'm very pagan and animist, and I think the land holds us. And generally salt of the earth people, I understand them better. Sometimes I do find stories of trans and queer and gender nonconforming folks who may sometimes feel afraid to be in rural areas. How, and within the populations you serve, because intersectionality, right? Do you have any stories from people of your populations who are in the queer community and maybe how you bridge the gap for people in your communities who may not be queer and those who are queer? I'm just interested if you do have any experiences speaking directly, just because I feel we will have more people move to the state of Oregon from all over America, families included, not just homeless teenagers. And I think that's something that could be more of a conversation. And it's not necessarily that the city is doing anything better because I can't afford to live here.
Does anybody want to respond to that? Anybody have any thoughts?
Well, I'm not sure if this is helpful because I'm not sure I understand the question, but I can just say that we have had experience with transgender people in our community housing, and it's never been much of an issue at all. People are pretty accepting, and it just hasn't been a problem. When it comes down to where to put people or that type of thing, I've seen nothing but people welcome, just depending on how people identify being accepted by other residents and certainly by staff. So I don't know if that's anything to do with what you were asking, but that's been my experience so far with providing housing.
Maria?
I want to apologize because I don't think it's enough education out there for the community at large and subjects like transgender. I feel your fear because I'm different. At the same time, I don't know exactly your fear, but I respect it. I don't have many experiences. Sexuality, I think in our community sometimes, and gender identification is a taboo. Nobody wants to talk. It's there. We don't want to approach. What we do as a community, as an organization that supports diversity, is to educate our residents and our staff and diverse communities and diverse everything. Do we have more people and with much respect like you, that looks like you in our communities? We don't. And if we have, they hide. They hide because I hide sometimes too, as much as I can, obviously. But I will hope that at some point, you know, we have the capacity to welcome, to be more open, to be more accepting. I don't think we are there, and I apologize for that. Thank you.
So I want to ask what came up. I had a question. You all have such depth of experience in different kinds of projects. If you could give a piece of advice, one piece of advice to your past selves on the kind of projects that you've worked on and what you might do differently if you were, 10 years ago you versus now you, what might that be? Any takers?
I would probably work harder locally to educate our community on recovery and recovery housing, and just try to. It's been tough to do, but I think that looking back 10 years, I've been there for 22 years. I definitely would have worked closer to try and get folks a little more educated about the fact that recovery happens.
Connie?
I think for in the private sector coming from a business, I think looking back, I would probably research more of the partnerships and the available resources for developing housing. I did not know that there were so many resources out there available to me as an employer in a small town. And I wish I would have known about those resources when I started this project back in 2017, 2018.
I entered the industry of affordable housing 18 years ago, and I was brainwashed by the Farmworker Housing Development Corporation. I made that change because I came from the business sector. I have my book and I say, this is how we do business. I call it business. My board made faces when I did that because I didn't talk about residents, I talk about clients. And at some point I have to decide, or do I continue my work in affordable housing and just better walk out because I cannot talk business when I'm talking about human beings. We need to make sure that we are a welcoming environment, that fair housing is out of work. With much respect to fair housing that is back there. Thank you.
All right, I think one more from the crowd. Go ahead.
I kind of wanted to follow up on the earlier question that Shane asked. And I really appreciate your response specifically of like, there's not enough education out there or we don't have enough information. And I think a piece of feedback and maybe an offering, trans folks exist everywhere. And while we are going to hide for our safety, it's about what and who is there to support us or be an welcome in arm. And sometimes when we say that we don't have enough information or there's not enough information out there, it closes the door for anybody to interact with that specific community. So I just want to offer for you all who are feeling like I don't have enough information to ask, like there are folks out there, and if you see them, you might be willing to engage, and that will open the door for that. And then my other question is specifically to Black communities in rural spaces, because we know that in this country, there is a trend to make anybody who is different or a person of difference illegal, and how much that isolates folks from entering specific communities. And I think about rural communities specifically because as folks are being pushed from this metro region, they are trickling into these areas trying to find safety, jobs, community, et cetera, and they're also feeling like they're not welcomed in those spaces either because it's like you're coming in to take what we already have. And so one of the questions that I have is just wanting to know what kinds of conversations are you having and or willing to have with specific communities that are seeking to figure out if this is a community that they can build in, invest in, come into without feeling like they're being pushed right back out of that space to be somewhere else?
I don't know that we're as much as being built. I think it's addressed to me.
Okay.
Right.
I think communities of colors at large understand they are not welcome. That's a fact. Is it right? It's not. When I see some of my mainstream residents telling my managers, show me your papers. I want to make sure that you are authorized to work in this country. That they don't want to obey rules or follow rules, so they say obey, follow rules of any housing. When they want to do stuff that, when they get upset because the kids, white and brown kids and Black kids are playing outside and they are speaking Spanglish, they don't care. We are the ones that we teach them to our kids. I'm having conversations. I'm having conversations because I'm facing that in every town that I try to get into it. But those conversations sometimes don't take me anyway. And I have to hire attorneys that can help me, can tell me, just keep it quiet, Meg, I will do the talking. Sometimes we need to look for those allies that look like them, and we can do the work that we need to do. And a community that doesn't come, like Stephen was saying, it doesn't come to damage your community. We are improving communities. We are coming with services. We are coming with programs for our folks to understand what is to live in a community. Hope that helps. Thank you.
Well, thanks. We're out of time. I'd like a round of applause for our panel for helping